Hello and welcome everyone to episode number 68 at the Indie Football Podcast. Ever since we have started this close to 22 months ago, we have just kept on raising the bar when it comes to our guest episodes. And today, I think we have hit the roof when we announced that we have got James Pearce with us. Of course, thank you, James, for taking out the time. I know we have crept into your tight schedule, but how are you feeling tonight?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited about the return of the Premier League this weekend. It feels a long time ago that Liverpool win over Brentford, and yeah, I'm not a massive fan of international football, and you always hope and pray that your players are going to come back fit and healthy, and yeah, thankfully this time it seems to have gone quite well for Liverpool. Lots of players who have
Yeah.
gone away and done well for their countries, like Luis Diaz and Darwin Núñez, and
Hmm.
saw Gakpo scored as well, and so, hopefully that'll have a positive knock-on effect. So, yeah, really excited about being at the Etihad on Saturday for that big game.
Yeah, Anukarsh, I feel this is one of your biggest moments, even though we have had various kinds of club representatives, club fans, when it comes to Premier League and all sorts of leagues around the world. But knowing you as my co host for the last 2 years, please try to summarize your emotions into words if you can in the first place.
Absolutely, man. Honestly, like I am a big fan of James, and honestly, like what I really like about James is whatever he does, it creates a culture on Liverpool Twitter. Like whatever, if it's good or if it's bad. And the funny part is that usually it's about what is happening behind the boardroom, what is happening in the Liverpool FC football club. That he has not no, like he cannot do anything about the transfer dealings or what. At the end of the day, it happens on behalf of the club. But I like how whenever James, when he came out with the Thiago update a few years back, everyone was like, "James, you're the best." And when sometimes James posts cold water on some rumor, everyone goes on negative. So it's quite ironic. But James, before I hop on to the first question that I'm going to ask you, you just published an article which said standards are set by the ones who need to live them for Liverpool, and talking about the culture. So of course, I'm sure that is what you do yourself too, since you have been doing an excellent job at athletic. But like, do you see a cultural change at Liverpool FC this season, and how do you think it has benefited the team's fall?
Yeah, it was an interesting piece to write, actually. You're right, that's been published on the Athletic today. Spoke to a number of staff and players about the what is a new look leadership group, really, because of course it felt like a bit of a step into the unknown this season to lose Jordan Henderson and James Milner. Very rare that a top club loses their captain and vice captain in the same
Mm,
transfer window. And I think, but between them, probably 800 plus appearances for the club. They were the two big dominant personalities in that dressing room. Um, and I think it's a really positive sign, the fact that others have stepped up and really found their voice. And so it was interesting, yeah, learning about the way in which Virgil van Dijk has put his stamp on the captaincy. The same with Trent Alexander-Arnold with the vice captaincy. Both of them being a lot more, I'd say, visible around the training ground, spending more time there, making sure they're available to people, doing everything they can to help the new players and their families settle in, young players looking out for them when they come up from the academy to train with the first team. And then, yeah, team bonding stuff, like they had a big night out in London after the game against Tottenham back in October. And yeah, just kind of trying to create that togetherness and spirit and unity, which was certainly one of the big qualities of the Klopp team that won the Champions League and won the Premier League. And of course, it's a different team now, and it's not easy to keep that going. And as you said, in terms of the kind of the motto amongst the staff is they want the standards to be set by the players themselves. They don't want Jurgen Klopp and Pep Linders having to say day after day, this is the level you have to reach. They want the
mm,
dressing room to almost police itself, I guess, in terms of, you want the captain and the other leaders. And I think that was the other thing that struck me is it's not just Virgil and Trent. The people were very positive about the input of Andy Robertson, Allison, Mohamed Salah. Liverpool have got, when you think of it, there are five really big personalities, for great stories behind them, very different backgrounds, some of them, yet, they've achieved so much in football. And you think that is a brilliant group to lead the rest of them. And then, on top of that, you've got Szoboszlai and Endo, who are national team captains as well. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's early days, of course, and I think it's probably easier to lead when things are positive and results are good. But I do think that bodes really well for the season ahead. The fact that, yes, Henderson and Milner have gone, but there's a kind of a new kind of freshness and dynamic to it now.
I think that is quite interesting that you summarize this entire Liverpool situation right now. But if you ask any Liverpool fan right now, and in our podcast also, with the idea being trying to establish small communities around Premier League clubs, which is the biggest league in India that currently gets attention. You did mention it a bit earlier in this, just when we started it. What do you think about the big match over the weekend where everyone has their eye on, Man City? They have now, after a relatively slow start to the season, they are back to familiar territory with them being amongst the top teams. And do you think Liverpool have it in them to produce an upset on this weekend?
It's not an upset.
Of
Yeah,
course, it's not an upset. It's not an upset. It's
well,
it
I
would
mean,
be the worst panel for me to say if it's an upset on already.
well, I know what you mean though, because I think Liverpool haven't won in the Premier League at the Etihad since November 2015, which was, of course, was shortly after Klopp took over. I know we had the win there in the Champions League, but I've sat through some pretty miserable trips to the Etihad in recent years. You think back to April, that 4-1 defeat. It was that really painful 2-1 defeat when we just missed out on the title in 2019. When, if you remember, they had the John Stones goal line clearance. I think, what was it, 11 millimeters? I think the technology showed from crossing the line, and even going back beyond that, the 5-0 defeat after Sadio Mane got sent off for that high boot on Ederson early on. So it hasn't been a happy place for Liverpool in recent years. But yeah, I'm pretty optimistic. I think probably cautiously optimistic would be the right description, because I think at the minute there's a bit of an unknown in terms of, has everyone definitely come back okay, and what kind of shape are they in after the travel? Of course, I think probably as we're sat here now, the South American players are on that plane coming back. The Liverpool and City contingent together, ironically, and then of course there was a lot of City players, weren't there, who didn't go away with their countries because apparently they were injured. Now we'll see on the weekend just how injured they were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously Haaland and of course Ederson didn't go away with Brazil. They've been missing. John Stones has been a big miss for them. Obviously De Bruyne, and I also think that they don't look the same team to me without Gundogan. I think he was so important to what they achieved in the treble-winning season last season. So yeah, I think as great a game as it was with that 4-4 draw that City had down at Chelsea, I do think that is a good blueprint for Klopp to use going into the weekend, and I'm sure he will have examined that very closely, because City couldn't control that game. I think they had 3 times and got pegged back each time, and that was very Man City like, really, to see them look so vulnerable. And Chelsea pressed really well, forced mistakes.
Right.
They were also brave in possession and played around the press. And if Liverpool can do that, then we know with the front line and the firepower that Liverpool have got, they can really kind of, I think cause City a lot of problems. So yeah, I think it's always tricky as well with the 12:30 kickoff as it is in the UK on Saturday, because it's such a quick turnaround. I mean, I think Klopp said before the break he was only expecting to have 1 training session with his entire squad before the weekend. So you're so limited as a manager in terms of what you can do in terms of preparing it. But yeah, I am optimistic.
Fair enough. James, like, I really hope that we get the win against City this weekend. But yeah, talking about you, So, like, I keep on talking here and there with Paul Ghost of the Liverpool Echo, who I'm sure you know very well. I remember that time when he told me that, don't sleep, mate. We are going to announce something about Diogo Jota into us, and the
He
agreed
actually
deal
did that.
announcement came out. Yeah, that actually happened, and I was stunned. So, of course, Ian and both Paul, they keep on mentioning you at the Echo whenever some article comes out from the Athletic. So, do you kind of miss working at the Liverpool Echo where you spent over a decade? Or is the Athletic your new home now?
Oh, the Athletic is definitely home now. Yeah, yeah. I think it was 4 years in July, just gone that I left the Echo. So I miss the people. I'm lucky that I still see a lot of the same people around. Obviously, in my job now, people like Paul Gorst and Ian Doyle from the Echo. So yeah, I don't so much miss the job itself because I really enjoy what I'm doing at the moment. And I think I've got probably a bit more freedom to focus on what I find really interesting. I think it's a very different kind of business model between the Echo and the Athletic, where obviously the Echo is all about generating web hits and there's a lot of advertising attached to all
Yeah,
the stories, as you'll see when you try and open a link, especially on your phone. Whilst the Athletic is more kind of, I'd say, in depth. And
Hmm.
so where at the Echo I might have been writing 6 or 7 stories a day, now I'm probably doing 3 or 4 a week. But
hmm.
you're given more time to do them. You can speak to more people. You can research more. So I'd say it's probably a bit more rewarding than I found my previous job. But yeah, the biggest thrill is still the fact that every time I wake up in the morning, I'm writing about the club I love. So yeah, I feel very fortunate on that front.
So,
Yeah.
but before like Doipan jumps in, because
Nah, no, no
with
issues.
the yeah, I have just one more question. That like you being a dad of two, and I read about that you just completed 2 years in May this year with your wonderful partner. So, like, how do you deal with all the social media abuses like that keep on coming in for no reason? And sometimes even from the Liverpool manager himself, who sometimes gets a bit animated about some article you might not they have a very direct involvement in. So, how do you, as a person, deal with all of that? Being a journalist for a top organization.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something I kind of help mentor a few young journalists and students that are looking to break into journalism, and it's something that I talk to them a lot about because I think certainly when I was training to become a journalist, coming up to 22, 23 years ago now, social media didn't exist, so
Hmm.
nobody told us, or because it was it wouldn't have made any sense for it to even feature back then. So but it was something like you just had to get to grips with because when I was at the Echo, that was when really kind of Twitter especially took off. So and of course, it wasn't even really it wasn't really an option. You had to do it. You had to and it's funny because there's kind of two sides to social media. I think social media has been brilliant for me in one way in terms of building up a big following. It helps raise your profile. It helps more than anything. It helps bring more people to your work, which any journalist wants their work to be read by as many people as possible. So on that side of it, it's great, and you're right. It's we talk about you have to take the rough with the smooth, and the rough I'd say has got pretty rough at times, especially in recent years with just the sheer amount of abuse. And I do think it's changed a lot for the worse, social media, with like the vitriol and the some of the I've kept some screenshots over the years of some of the most obscene names that I've been called, and I think you just learn that you have to be thick-skinned, and
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I'd be lying if I said it didn't affect me at times, because I think it's funny because and I'm sure I'm not the only person who does it, but sometimes you scroll through your mentions and there might be 10 or 12 positive things, but it tends to be the negative ones that kind of lodge in your head. And
right.
when suddenly there's those few negative ones becomes a few dozen, or at times it might be a few hundred. Yeah, that can be difficult to deal with. but yeah, I find myself kind of spending less time on social media now, just to avoid. I try and avoid as much as possible the other side of it, because I think sometimes you can become too caught up in it and too worried about what other people are saying, and sometimes you have that urge to reply to someone, especially if they're telling lies about you, which I see quite frequently. But then you think, well, why, if you reply to someone, then you're almost giving oxygen to their ridiculous opinion, and then more people see their initial tweet because you've replied to them. So but yeah, it's not a pleasant side of the job, I'd say, especially that, because the number of times when you might, I might reply to someone and say, why on earth would you call me that, or think it's acceptable to say those names? And they'll just say, well, you should be able to take it, you're a journalist. And it's like, I don't really know any other profession really where like people think it's okay just to to just unleash the most foul-mouthed of abuse. And as you said, it tends to, especially for the trolls, they kind of feed off any little thing. So yeah, people will remember back, I think it was at Molineux, wasn't it, after the Wolves game back in probably February this year, when I asked Jurgen Klopp a question and he refused to answer me and said, I'm not going to answer a single word you say. Someone else will have to answer the same question. And and then it turned out when I asked afterwards, why have I got that response? Because I had no idea. I hadn't actually written. I don't think I'd had an article published for 2 or 3 days leading up to that game. And I found out it was actually an article written by another reporter for a different publication that had actually upset him. But of course, if I'd then gone on, radio or TV or whatever, which, had lots of organizations contact me saying, oh, can you come on and talk about what happened? I don't think that would have helped it. I think it would have made things worse, because people would have said, well, he's got the wrong, so now you're accusing Klopp of getting the wrong. It's just like, sometimes you're just better off just going, do you know what? Let's just let it go. And I think the other thing that's changed a lot with the job is, I remember being at lots of press conferences when I first started off, when managers would be quite confrontational and spiky with their answers, and sometimes would criticize journalists openly. But of course, in those days, press conferences weren't shown live on YouTube and live on Sky or whatever. So it was a completely different era. And, people get excited with Jurgen Klopp, has a go back at someone. You're like, well, that's part of the job. Like, if, Jurgen Klopp has been Liverpool manager for 8 years, I'd say if I've been I've been doing the job throughout his entire reign. If I've never asked anything that's annoyed him, then you're probably not doing your job properly, because sometimes you have to ask questions that managers don't want to answer, or they don't like. And so that's like a weird part of the job where I had a ridiculous one when I think there was another time earlier on this season when Jurgen was a bit kind of spiky towards me when I asked him something. I think it was about 12:30 kickoff, and people jump in, and especially on social media, and oh, Klopp hates Pearce and all this, and like
it becomes an agenda.
Yeah.
And it's just a load of nonsense. Like I get on absolutely fine with Jurgen Klopp, and I've got massive respect for him. He's given me some of the best nights of my life, not just as a reporter, but full stop. And so no, there's no issues. There's no issues there. It's just one of the strange sides of the job that when something like that happens, millions of people see it, and the trolls just jump on it.
I feel one of the most interesting aspects in this is how the role of everything around sports has transitioned over the years, given the advent of technology and different things around it. But now, of course, when I will give you a small backstory where all these scarves that you see behind me, I had recently gone to London as part of my college study trip. I am a recent sports management master's graduate, so we do understand, coming from Indian college, coming from the Indian sports industry, we have had various tie-ups with the Premier League, and how Premier League as a league, as a brand, recognizes India as one of the big international markets. So, James, what I'm trying to ask or kind of pick your brains is, do you think there has been a conscious effort by Premier League clubs now to leverage on the support that they have, particularly from the Indian regions? Because in India, there is a PL for India, there is different kinds of not only Liverpool fan clubs, but various big Premier League fan clubs. So, as a journalist, as someone who likes to report everything around football, all things that would probably grab someone's attention, do you feel it is also relevant or important enough to understand what big markets, probably the USA or India, as I'm talking about, means for for big, even the biggest Premier League clubs
Yeah.
like Liverpool, as a journalist?
Yeah, 100%. And I know I can only speak for Liverpool's perspective in terms of what I've seen, but it's become a lot more of a global institution and much more kind of aware, I'd say, and kind of wanting to engage with that global fan base. I remember doing an
Yes.
interview with Billy Hogan, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, when he talked about, their data suggested Liverpool could have 380 million fans globally. He said, and he talked about, we've got a duty to like take the club to those people that aren't lucky enough to be going to Anfield every
Yeah.
week. And I think that's what makes Liverpool quite unique, really, in terms of I've been lucky with my job that, following Liverpool has taken me all over the world. And, I've sat in the MCG in Melbourne, Australia, with 95,000 people singing You Never Walk Alone, packed out stadiums in Bangkok and Jakarta and Singapore and, all across America. So, and it always amazes me the sheer passion of these people. I think sometimes people who aren't in tune with that passion maybe thinks that these are people that are fair weather fans, that they might flick through the channels and watch a game or whatever if they've got nothing else to do, when the reality is some of the most passionate Liverpool fans I've ever met live thousands and thousands of miles away. I know people that, get up at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning to watch matches, whether that's, in Asia, in America, in Australia. So yeah, it's definitely something that the club have become more and more aware of. I mean, I think India is an interesting one because, of course, Liverpool, have been to lots of parts in Asia, on tour, and I'd love to see them make, add India to that list of destinations they've been to. I mean, in terms of fan bases over there, which
Yeah.
would Liverpool be the biggest team, or would it be Manchester United in terms of fans, or who else?
I think United and then Liverpool, and then we go into
Definitely.
the Real Madrid directions. But
Right.
yeah, I think that does that answer. Yeah, Anuka sir, you want to ask something as we
Yeah,
look to
but
probably approach the business end of this episode.
yeah, I cannot be a true Liverpool fan if I don't ask about the transfer gossip from James because, of course, he is like the king when it comes to that. So, James, what should we be expecting from the January transfer window? And even far further down the line, in the next transfer window, do you think it would be more about the centre half signings when it comes to the next summer transfer window also?
Yeah. So in terms of January, I think January will be quite quiet for Liverpool. I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised if there was much business. I know that Liverpool have tended. There's been times when they've sprung a surprise in January. You think back to last January with the Cody Gagpo one that
Yeah.
came relatively out of the blue. When that deal suddenly became available. And I think that's the thing. It's very difficult to predict this far out in terms of what deals can be done and at what price, and also the need. I think if you're looking at that Liverpool squad at the moment, like I worry about that number 6 position in terms of not having a real elite specialist holding midfielder. Of course, everyone knows what happened in the summer with, I don't think, with Caicedo and Lavia, and then, with the clock ticking, bringing in Wataru Endo. I think considering the jump up in class that he's experienced going from Stuttgart to Liverpool, I actually think he's done pretty well so far. I think that adaptation period for him is still ongoing. But, I think, and McAllister has shown that he's had some really good games in that position, but I think there's been other times where you've gone, you can see he's not a specialist number 6. Yes, he played deeper at times at Brighton, but it was usually always with Caicedo for company, rather than just as the number 6 on his own. So I do, funnily enough, I think that will be one of the key things at the Etihad this weekend in terms of that number 6 role, because I think that's always been the concern this season, is against the better teams, will that cost Liverpool not having a real specialist there? I know there's been obviously lots of talk about Andre at Fluminense. Yes, Liverpool were interested in him back in the summer. I think it was after their second bid for Lavia had been turned down, and they were told then that, no chance, we need him for the Copa Libertadores and the rest of the Brazilian domestic season. And even though now I know they've made it clear now, they've obviously that they won that final, that they would be willing to do business in January. But from the people I've spoken to at Liverpool, their attitude at the minute is, we're not in the market for a number 6 at the moment. They've pointed to, the fact they've got McAllister. They expect Endo to grow in terms of his role. And then, of course, you've got Stefan Bajcetic and Thiago to come back, around the turn of the year. So, and then in terms of throwing it further forward to next summer, yes, I think buying at least one centre back will be the priority. You've got a situation there where Joel Matip will be out of contract. It'd be interesting to see, Jarrell Kwanzaa, I think, has come out of nowhere and impressed everyone.
Absolutely.
If you'd said back in August that he would be, he could start a Premier League game and no one would be massively worried, you wouldn't have believed it. So that's sometimes young players can emerge and completely rip up recruitment plans in terms of what you need to bring in. I think another interesting one to look out for next summer will be, it wouldn't surprise me if Liverpool sign a right back and make Trent Alexander-Arnold a midfielder permanently. I think, I think I wouldn't say that's like nailed on. I wouldn't say that's certain, but I think there's a good chance that might happen, because I think we're seeing the evolution of Trent, into a midfielder at the minute. And then of course you've got the other fascinating one, is what's going to happen with Mo Salah next summer, because and again I think it's too far out to say, but I'm not expecting anything to happen with him in January. I'm not even expecting the Saudis to come back in for him in January. I don't, I think the big push for him was because they wanted him to be in the Club World Cup for them. That would have been a big thing for them, which is coming up, isn't it, in a few weeks. So, but next summer is obviously a different story. Salah will be down to his last year. I'm sure the Saudis, with Salah's profile as it is, they were desperate to get him in the summer. They'll try again next summer. So, a lot of that will depend on what Salah wants himself, because, when you're down to the last year of your contract, does he want to stay and keep rewriting the record books at Anfield, which I hope that's what he decides, because, he's just a remarkable footballer in every possible way, in terms of, that his numbers don't show any sign of dropping off. It's not a normal situation for a player of his age. If I was Liverpool, I wouldn't hesitate giving him another 2-year extension, because, I think he's worth every penny of that. That contract was at £350,000 a week, the highest paid player in Liverpool's history. There was a lot of stories written around that time saying, is it going to be like an Aubameyang situation, or a Mesut Ozil situation where you sign a big contract and then players put their feet up and don't deliver? But that was never ever going to happen with Mo Salah. So, Yeah, that'll be an interesting one next summer. But yeah, I really hope he stays put.
I think there's so much that can potentially happen, and so much that always keeps all kinds of Liverpool fans on the edge of their seats. But thank you, James. We won't keep you around for too long. Anukar sir, I think you are going to see this episode as the most viewed episode from your end in our podcast's history, and I don't think I'm stretching too much when I say that, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think 1,000 views are going to be from my side only because honestly, like for the last 30 minutes, I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, James is actually on the podcast. So, yeah, of course,
Yeah.
James, for us as an Indian football podcast who is trying to create a footballing culture in India, it meant a lot to us when you said yes, especially after your vacation coming in. Goes to show the character that you have, the person that you are. And all these years I had known James Pearce, the journalist. Today I know him as the man. So thank you so much for coming in on the Indie Football Podcast, and we look forward to keeping in touch with you. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, no problem, boys. Yeah. Keep in touch, and hopefully I'll be back on later in the season when we're talking about cup finals and the title challenge. That would be nice.
Absolutely. That's the
Absolutely.
hope, James. That's the hope. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Take care.
Cheers.
Yeah.